Hello and welcome to another episode of the Brothers Discuss. I am Alex.
And I am Chris.
Chris, it's been a while, but to get into the holiday spirit, we're going to break our vow of silence on Star Wars and talk about Star Wars, but not the current show, Skeleton Crew. We may talk about that at some point. We're going to talk about the show that everybody hated this year, and that was The Acolyte.
I'm kind of curious why you chose now to talk about the Acolyte all these months later.
I mean, truth be told, I've been meaning to get this discussion going months ago as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, we haven't really talked about the Acolyte like in real life either. So I'm kind of curious how we feel about the show.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have a vague idea of how you're going to feel about it.
Okay.
But I kind of wanted to have this discussion because it was a show that generated quite a bit of controversy among Star Wars fans. And when I say Star Wars fans, I do mean a very loud vocal minority, of course. And ultimately, the show got canceled. So we're going to talk about it. So, Chris, I'm going to put you on the spotlight. What is your general, snapshot view of The Acolyte?
My general view is that I think the show is fine. I don't think it is anything to get excited about, nor anything to get pissed about. It's kind of just a shrug of the shoulders Star Wars show, but to me, it's no different than a lot of Star Wars shows we've gotten lately. And that, I think, is kind of the biggest thing, that stood out to The Acolyte is, I think the show, The Acolyte, it has a lot of ideas that I find more interesting in shows like, I don't know, Ahsoka or Obi-Wan or stuff, or the later seasons of The Mandalorian. And I think for that reason, I kind of prefer Acolyte over those shows, over Ahsoka, over Obi-Wan, and the later seasons of The Mandalorian. But obviously, you're not reaching for the highs, which is Mandalorian season 1 or Andor. That's on a whole different level. Acolyte's just got some good ideas, but in the end, it's the show didn't really mean that much to me, and probably even less now that it's canceled, because it leaves the book open for more, and we'll just never see it's bizarre.
So my snapshot view, I feel like I'm going to come off pretty negative in a lot of ways, but my general impression is that I enjoyed this. I thought it was entertaining, B-, solid B-, I would say. But overall, there's something kind of cool here and definitely entertaining. And it's sort of miles ahead of Obi-Wan, which was an unmitigated disaster in my mind. I even thought Book of Boba Fett was better than Obi-Wan because at least it wore its badness on its sleeve and didn't have quite the expectation of this Darth Vader versus Obi-Wan reunion thing with the top cast level there.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall entertaining and some interesting story threads happening here in themes. And maybe I'll just get this out of the way. I think my problem with Star Wars since the original trilogy is that, and this is all George Lucas's fault. I'm putting the blame squarely on him because he made the prequels, and the prequels is what started all this shit. This rooting themselves in the past and it trying to explain literally everything. With the original films, it was very simple. It was a story of a tyrannical government who overreached with their power, and it caused a breaking point in the people, and they rebelled. And a rebellion can be anyone. It can be a spoiled princess who's pushed too far. It could be a scoundrel who finds his better nature through helping others. Or it could be a farm boy who has a secret power. And it wasn't about any one of those things. It was about all of them coming together for a greater cause, which was a big political statement. And throughout all of that, we used our imaginations, with lightsabers. They were just cool laser swords. Good guys had blue or green ones, bad guys had red ones. That was it. Any questions we had about things like cool little details, we just filled in the gaps on our own. Sometimes you would get a book that would be you see, this guy is really from this planet, but it didn't really change anything fundamentally, or didn't make the source material about that thing. And then suddenly Lucas decided that he wanted to... So the Clone Wars is a good example. When Obi-Wan throwaway just said, I fought with your father in the Clone Wars. We're like, that sounds cool. Anyway, like that was it. Like it was just a small detail to fill out the world, and then we move on. Like that's it. Like something happened in the past, and it changed people, maybe for the better, but probably for the worse. And that was it. That's all we needed. We didn't need to fucking see the Clone Wars. Like that's just never a thing that was expected. Like we didn't need, like Lucas decided, like, no, it's all about the Clone Wars. Like you guys don't even know. And we had to spend the next 30 years explaining the Clone Wars. Like all the newest stuff, like Ahsoka. Like it talks about the Clone Wars. It's supposed to be moving forward, and it's not. It's rooted in the past. And so I'm starting to run out of breath. Like that's how insane I'm getting about this. But like my point is, like, you got Ahsoka, which is set after Return of the Jedi, but it still deals with all these issues from before that. Like, and I'm just like, enough of this shit. Like, there's got to be so many great stories to tell. Like, we don't need to know the reason why everything is like the way it is. And so this show kind of is also doing that in a way that did annoy me a lot. But, I mean, we can get into that when we get to it. But, like, those are the biggest problems I had. Like, when there was something happening that clearly I was already supposed to know about, like, I got annoyed. Like, because, A, I didn't know what it was because I'm not religiously devoted to every single piece of Star Wars media. And B, it just didn't make sense because I didn't know what it was. But I was fully recognizing that it was a thing that I was supposed to know. So that annoyed me because a good piece of storytelling, like if you're going to leave a cheeky wink to people in the know, it still needs to make sense to people who don't know. And it very clearly did not make sense to me when I was supposed to know and didn't. So that's a failing in terms of just contained singular storytelling.
Okay.
So, I mean, just real quick, like, it just feels like every single little concept that was introduced in A New Hope and expanded upon just feels like less. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, no,
like,
I get that, yeah.
The Force is originally just this mysterious, mystical, like, power. And then all of a sudden Lucas is like, no, it's all about midichlorians. And then like Obi-Wan's like, wow, he's an old ancient like Jedi Knight. But then when you see the Jedi in the prequels, they're all wearing the same robes that Obi-Wan wore.
Yeah.
And then they all just live in this shitty building in the middle of the city. And it's so when you expand on just simple things, like if just you're just making it worse. But then here you get Darth Plagueis is here. And so I guess that's my big criticism of the show right off the bat is I don't like how it just mined the Star Wars universe for some ideas and say, like, we're going to world build on those. Like, I like the show for other reasons, like how the story is sort of broken up in an Rashomon sort of story. But it's not quite a Rashomon kind of story, which we can get into if you want. You want to jump into that?
Yeah. Sure, if you want to.
Yeah, sure. So my problem with it is like it felt like the objective facts of the story were revealed in a way that felt annoying to me because
the reveal early, I feel like.
Yes, like the reveals weren't for a reason. Like they were just to keep the audience guessing like what was going on. So to me, it felt like withholding information from the audience to keep them hooked on where the story was going. Not that it had some narrative power within the show. And I think the power of a second perspective is sort of what you need from a Rashomon thing. Like one or more perspectives revealed to sort of change how you feel about something that you've been holding for a little while. Like, oh, the way I felt about this character. And they tried to do that. But they didn't do it in a Rashomon way. Like a good example would be Luke and Kylo from The Last Jedi, where they had two vastly different perspectives of the same situation that changed how you felt about it. This one was just like, we're just not going to tell you the full story, but we're going to give you two full-length episodes that cover almost the entire same ground with just a little bit extra on top of it. It's like, we didn't need that first flashback episode to be a full-length episode. Like, if you're not going to give us the full big picture, then keep it short. It felt
Yeah.
like a tremendous waste of time to give us a whole flashback. Like, it was weird, man. I
It
get that,
was.
like, the witches of, like, whatever they are like a thing if you've watched like the cartoons, like it's already well established lore. But for me, as someone who's just invested in the movies, this idea that there are force users who are more like fantasy, like they lean more towards the fantasy side of sci fantasy, like
Hmm.
it just feels a little strange to me. And part of that was the way they were presented. They did something in episode 3, in this flashback episode, that they've only done once in Star Wars, and they deleted it. They retroactively got rid of it, which is diegetic music that turns into the score. So they're singing this song, but then the score becomes the song. And Yub Nub was the only other time that happened. Like at
Yeah.
the end of Return of the Jedi, like the Ewok celebration song became the score. And then Lucas said, like, no, that was dumb. I'm going to change it. And so it's not there anymore. So unless I'm wrong, this is the only canon example of a song being sung by characters becoming the score. And it just felt so not Star Wars. Like it felt cheap.
Sure. Yeah. I don't really have too much to say. I mean, you're also like pulling, really, really far memories. A lot of the show has already left my brain, to be
Oh,
honest. Um, but yeah, no, it's interesting to kind of think about that kind of stuff, I guess. It doesn't bother me. It feels like there's more examples where like songs transition to the score, but I guess not. I can't think of any. It doesn't sound surprising for Star Wars, though.
I don't know. Like I think the motivation for the score to be that celebratory, like I'm going to sound like an asshole, but I
Hmm.
think it was just this like they were celebrating this moment where it's like a commune of all women just supporting each other and celebrating each other and just having power. And they're like, look how amazing this is. Here's a song to help you understand how amazing this is. And I'm like, is it amazing though? Like, 'cause I don't know how to feel about this group. Like, are they bad? Like, Osha is terrified of them. She's terrified of the ceremony. She's completely mortally terrified of her sister. And
Right.
so the music came in and I was like, I don't think it's all that good. Like, you got to do more for me to understand. And I said I'm going to sound terrible because it just seemed like, you know, to see something like that in a show is like, you already know it's going to anger a certain group of people. So even just existing is impressive. And
Yeah.
I think the song maybe celebrated that fact a little too on the nose in a way that was the wrong sort of celebratory score. Like it needs to be contextual to the story, not necessarily about like the very real world impact that they may be having here. That's my
Hmm.
opinion of what the song felt like to me. That was just like, holy shit, like look at what we're doing here. She's black. Did you guys see that? Like it read very like I
Yeah.
don't know. Like I was like that moment was when I was like, who made this? Like, this feels like, again, I'm going to sound bad. I was like, it feels like a white lady made it. And I was right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Leslie Headland, I think her overall approach to the show is creative. It's a creative vision for
Hmm.
sure. I know she had a writing credit in all the episodes, and I think she directed 2 of the episodes, if I'm not mistaken. It doesn't hold a candle to Andor, but nothing does, frankly.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody's probably getting tired of us talking about Andor. Like, you know, a friend of mine was actually like, not everything can be Andor. Like, you got to set your expectations. But I don't know about you, Chris, but my expectations are Andor. Like,
In terms of quality, I guess, but it also kind of depends on like what kind of show you make. Like Skeleton Crew. Now, I've only seen the first episode so far, but
okay.
I think like that show. Obviously, I'm not feeling it as much as I would feel Andor, but I think it's very effective as to like what it does. Kind of
Yeah.
having like the Goonies, Stand by Me vibes in that show, and I think like that's all well and good. It doesn't. I'm not like looking for everything to be exactly like Andor. Andor is just really damn good at what it does, and it's just right up my alley for the type of show I would watch. Whereas you can have all these different things, and that's my problem, I guess, with Acolyte is that it feels like it's trying to be like Andor in that context, and like in terms of the drama and like going through all the gray area of Star Wars and hypocrisy and all that. But it's just obviously not as impressive
Sure.
as something like that.
But like to me, Andor exists, and I can't
Yeah,
pretend that it doesn't. And
absolutely.
there is no reason, as far as I know, that other stuff can't look like that, other than just like skill and craft. Like it's
Mhm.
down to the individual and how they decide to run their show, and they're just not running it like Andor. Like I talked about dealing with the past too, which Andor does, because like I said, the Star Wars obsession is just always explaining to you why.
Mhm.
And that show took the best why of all. Like, why did these people rise up to find the strength to face an empire? And it's like, here's why. And it's like,
Yeah.
that adds something. Like, that has a tremendous impact on the world of Star Wars and also just sort of the real world as well. Like, it's like, I'm a big fan of science fiction that actually has something to say. And
Mhm.
I get very bored when the only thing they have to say is, so you see, that's why lightsabers are red. And I'm like, I never cared. I never even thought about that. Like it was just not an issue for me.
Yeah.
But I think for the Acolyte, like what I think, like here's my question: what do you think the real world analogy is for the Acolyte? Like what they're trying to explore here?
I couldn't tell you. That's what I mean. This kind of feels like a bridge between something that's reaching for Andor, but is stuck in the past quality of like George Lucas. It's kind of just like in that in-between area where it's trying to expand upon Lucas's vision in a way that's like not really satisfying for fans, but like interesting creatively. I don't know. It's such a bizarre show. I couldn't tell you like what the real world analogy of this is.
Sure, but I think what this was trying to explore thematically, at least, was maybe why are the Jedi so screwed up? Like, but I also think it's also trying to explore trauma in the show, which we could
Yeah.
talk about because I like with the twins. At first, I was like, why are they twins? Like, what is the purpose of there being two of them? And I guess like once the show is over, I was like, well, you're always struggling with two sides of yourself when you're dealing with trauma. So I like that. I like the split character, like that she's not really a twin. She's one person and this is one trauma, which I thought was a pretty crafty use of a twin. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of this seems to be, again, explaining how come Vader, like how was Vader born without a dad? And it was like, well, you see, the witches, the lightsaber turned red. Like a lot of
Yeah.
this seems to be motivated by trying to explain things about Vader's existence, which again kind of loses me. I'm like, I don't care. Like a friend shared an article because I was one of those guys that was like I sent a picture of Anakin about to strike down a bunch of kids and his lightsaber in the foreground is blue. And I was like, why isn't his lightsaber red? And he's like, everybody's saying that. And I'm like, but is that because it's a bad question or just like, are you dismissing it?
Yeah.
Because assholes are also asking that question. And he goes, like, he just sent me a link to the Darth Vader comic book miniseries. And the opening line was, the origin of Darth Vader's red lightsaber finally explained. And I was like,
Uh,
finally? Like, I never once, bad guy red. That's it. Like, that's the extent of the thought process behind it. And now we're just like fan fictioning all this shit, but on a professional level. And it just, sorry, I'm getting negative again. Like, let's turn it back. It's just like the show itself, like ups and downs all over the place.
yeah.
Like, I'm just like, oh, that was rad. Oh, that was really dumb. Oh, that was amazing. Like, oh god, that was the stupidest shit I've ever seen. What do you want to talk about positively first? Because I think I've got one in mind. That being the character of Saul.
Yep, he's the highlight for sure.
Yes, I think that Saul is a good use of trying to show a more benevolent projection of dark side tendencies, because the Jedi spend a lot of they spend a lot of yarn about how just emotions in general can lead to the dark side, like not just anger, like even if it's always like, feel your anger, like that's always like the go-to dark side chant, but he was feeling love, and he was feeling too much love, and it clouded his judgment, and it turned him into a bad person who was utterly convinced that what he was doing was the right thing the whole time. Like, he screwed up real bad. It cost several people their lives, and so I thought Saul was great. I like that actor.
Well, what's even greater is that like after the fact, he still carries on all of that guilt. And what's interesting about Soul to me is like, after the flashbacks and everything, like present day Soul, I feel like you get the vibe he kind of realizes the gray area of the Jedi. He's not proud of what he's doing. And
Mhm.
there is that like idea that the Jedi kind of monopolize basically on the Force and how it's used and how it's practiced. Um, and so it's kind of like, I don't like what I'm doing, but like, what else is there? He's been part of the system for too long. And I just like seeing his perspective through all of it is definitely like the best part of the show. That's what sticks out to me in the show. It's just everything with him.
Yeah. So early we weren't sure what the real world adjacent is with this show.
Mhm.
And I guess the closest thing that I came up with was just the police, which is bad.
Yeah.
Like that's a real bad way to sort of paint the Jedi. Like they get it
Yeah.
they did a good job of, because you know uh, Vernestra, is that her name? The sort of Jedi boss in the show.
I don't remember. I couldn't tell
But
you.
I think it is. But she was very much like we investigated ourselves when we found that we have done nothing wrong. Like that was basically her character arc the whole time, in a way that was like very scary. And
Yeah.
another problem with over explaining everything is we've spent a lot of time trying to explain how the Jedi could be as stupid as they are in the prequels. Like, how could they not see that Palpatine was the Emperor? How could they not defend themselves once Order 66 kicked off? Like,
Hmm.
why are they all so helpless and stupid? And I think the real reason is that Lucas just didn't have the vision to deliver on a good reason. And so now we're just left trying to make reasons. And it just makes them look worse and worse, to the point where you're like, how do they even exist at all? Like, in any stage, they're always like losing people to the dark side, just fucking up like on their own without dark side influence, like fumbling and bumbling all over the place. And like, I don't even believe at this point that they should even like that they're to be taken seriously in any way. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, they're all so goofy. They're just goofy clowns, like to the point where they just kind of look silly in this one. Like Vernestra's little assistant dude kept coming at him like this guy's such a weenus, man. Like, she's like, you let him in here, and he's like, oh, jeez, I don't know. Like you're a Jedi, bro. Like, what are you doing?
See, that's why it's like when you watch modern Star Wars, you kind of have to tune all that stuff out, which is pretty damn hard because it's like whether it's something like this or if you're in the Mandalorian era, it's like just trying to justify something in the chronological future that's stupid, like Palpatine coming back. We don't need 5 shows to explain why Palpatine is back. It's a stupid plot. We don't need this and it just feels like you're wasting true potential by like trying to explain things that just don't matter, and you could just tell
Yeah.
good stories.
Look, I totally get it. Like, I get what they're trying to do. Like, they have
Yeah.
to explain how Jedi fumbled the ball at the point that we get to in the movies. But
Yeah.
it's too much. Like, they just fumbled too much. Now I just can't stand them.
Hmm.
And by going back 100 years or whatever the show is supposed to take place, it's like, oh, they've been like, actually, you see, they've been fumbling way longer than that. And I'm like, okay, now they super shouldn't exist. And they're like, you see, Yoda is actually here. And I'm like, so Yoda is personally responsible for like centuries of failing and miscommunication and just self-policing, and just like, how many Sith Lords were created under Yoda's watch? You know what? Yoda could be arguably the most dangerous character in the entire series just because of his longevity alone.
Doesn't that like just feel so like far separated from like the Yoda in the original trilogy and the Last Jedi and everything? It's like you would never get the vibe that all of this shit was his fault.
Like, could Yoda be the secret villain of the entire saga?
I guess so.
Because look, like being so long-lived, like listen, like we've read enough vampire fiction to know what happens to someone's mind when they're like long-lived. Like when they outlive their loved ones and just see them grow old and die over and over again, you get bored, you get weird, you get a little dark. Like you want to see how far you can push some things. He's like, let's see if I can manipulate the galaxy into a full-blown civil war. Like if I just shut down enough ideas here, stoke a little bit of aggression there. Like, let's just see. Like, Palpatine's my guy, you know? Let's move on to another positive, and that is Manny Jacinto's Camille, who I thought was weirdly likable. Are you blanking on who I'm talking about?
Who the fuck are you talking about?
Camille, like the stranger.
The stranger?
The guy in the mask.
Oh, him. Yeah, no, he's cool. It's all right. Like you're just saying words when you say like all these names. Other than Soul, it's just like I'm totally blanked on a lot of this show.
I love this guy actually. He might be my MVP of the show.
Okay.
No. Take that back. There is one more character we'll talk about that is my MVP, but we'll get to him. But my favorite line, cold-blooded as shit, like when he killed Daphne Keene's character, who I loved her too, and Saul was like, she was a child. He goes, you brought her here. And it's like, bro, you're not wrong though.
Yeah.
Like you armed her and sent her to attack me. He's just like a dark character, but yet he's very empathetic, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a moment where she had just like when she killed Saul and he comes over to put like a hand on her shoulder, she's like don't. And he's like, yep, you're right. That wasn't cool. Like he's so sensitive to that. Like he's sensitive to everyone's emotions in a way that is like, I think maybe what I like about what this show seems to be suggesting, and again, this is just interpretive, but that embracing the dark side doesn't always necessarily mean evil. So it's like, maybe embracing emotions makes you more attuned to the emotions of others. And that's just sort of what we're seeing in his character, like his ability to not close off his emotions and actually use them to fuel his power, like gave him the ability to be sensitive to others, like when they were struggling. And generally it's like, no, don't feel that shit, cut it off. And so that is, to me, it's a little bit more of an interesting aspect of a dark side user. Like even it's like oh, he's evil. Like he's only killed Jedi who are combatants. Like they're trying to hurt him. So yeah, sure, like one's young, but again, she was armed and she tried to kill him. So it's like he's just observing the rules of war. Like he doesn't really do anything to non-Jedi from what I can recall. Like I may be wrong, but I don't think he hurts anybody outside of that.
Yeah.
What do you think of his look? Like the costume?
I like it. I actually like the mask a lot.
Yeah, it's a cool helmet to do in the midst of all this generosity that with the powers. like I like that idea that he basically puts like a sensory deprivation tank on his head. Like it puts him more in tune with the Force in a way that's like a blind samurai kind of way. Like I really like that.
Yeah.
And like the bit where Osha puts on the helmet and it was quite terrifying. Like I kind of wish they'd gone further with that.
Yeah.
But I also understand why they didn't though, because Camille almost died just when she put it on. So he's probably like don't ever touch my helmet again. Like that was a bad idea. My fault. Yeah. Just don't ever put that helmet on again. Like I'm just trying to just be naked and bathing in peace. I will say, I don't know if you've given this much thought, but do you think like there's some sort of Kylo Ren connection to this, just the design of this costume?
I did think about that when you first see his look, like in the Force and everything. It's like the mask kind of gives Kylo vibes, and I don't know. Maybe also like the build. You do see his abs in the show, so it's kind of like I did think about those kind of connections, not necessarily very deeply, but it did remind me of Kylo a lot.
Like whether like he ends up being like a founder of the Knights of Ren or something like that.
I
Who
don't,
knows? But there's something I do want to talk about real quick, and that is the score by Michael Abels,
mhm.
um, who I thought did a really good job with the score. He does some like the main theme of the show is a sort of homage to Kylo Ren's theme from the sequels.
Hmm.
Like it's a play on the theme. Like I'll play a little like side by side comparison. Like it's funny when a score can kind of reveal spoilers like that. Like because I remember when the first trailer for The Rise of Skywalker came out, and they played a piece of Kylo Ren's theme in a certain way during the trailer, and you're like, oh, Kylo's going to die. Like that's just what that means. Like that's why they gave his theme a heroic spin.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Kamir is overall like the mask was funny. Like I went back and forth on the teeth. I was like, this looks a little like Rob Zombie movie production levels, like maybe like a Jack-o'-lantern style. But then other times I'm like, this is a cool ass helmet, man. Like I like it. Like
Yeah.
and I like that his robe kind of left his arms out and you get to flex a little bit. Like it was a new sort of leaner, more streamlined sort of proto Sith Lord look. And
Yeah.
I dug it. Like it had a little more bit of like a homemade like kit bash style to it that gave sort of a homegrown feel. Like, you know, and I dug that. And I thought it was completely unsurprising that he was the stranger. Like the second he showed up and like she's like, you went to this jungle. He's like, yeah. Anyway, come on. I was like, oh, he's the bad guy.
Yeah.
Like the first time any other character runs into him, he takes his mask off, and I was like, oh, that's just instant reveal. Like, and I was like, I think the twist was so obvious. They were like, yeah, fuck it, just take the helmet off.
Mhm.
He had a line where she was talking to him while he was just a stranger, you know, like not Kamir, and he was like, you know, he collects people. Like, didn't you notice that? And I was like, no, nobody noticed that. There's no people. It's just her. Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean he collects people? Like, you didn't establish that he has this network of spies and influencers and stuff. It's just you two. And you're the bad guy, so it's just you two. Like two. Always two there are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was like, that was a little bit of a weird sort of beat that felt sloppy. It was like, they could have shown her interacting with other people in this network that he claims exists to sort of just set up a little bit more of a misdirect. But they just they got right to the point. Like they could have maybe used one of those entire flashback episodes to establish this sort of bigger threat that he poses with his network of his collected people. So I don't know. Like, you know, I like how we're going back and forth with things that we like and things we don't like in this.
That's the show. Yeah.
That is the show. So Finestra is an interesting character because like it was revealed that Kamir is her old Padawan, and I just did not care. Like this seemed like a thing that like I could be wrong, but apparently she exists outside of the show. Like maybe she was in like one of the cartoons or something. Like because they make a big deal about her whip, and she also experiences like visions while she's traveling in hyperspace. Like these are all like throwaway things that I knew right away. I was like, I'm supposed to know more about this, and they're not going to elaborate on it, and now I'm annoyed.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, they left a lot hanging for a second season that will
That's
never
the
come
big
now.
thing. They left that door wide open, you know, and we'll just never know like half these
Mhm.
things.
Right? Like just that much gambling on a second season is just kind of bad storytelling. Like
Yeah.
you could leave stuff open for a second season without
Yeah.
leaving other weird things a mystery. Like everything should be able to exist, like contained within the seasonal arc.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. Like, hate to bring it up again, but Andor, I think, is the perfect example of that. Like, it ends
exactly.
on a cliffhanger, but you don't feel like you need to see season 2 to understand season 1, you know?
Exactly. And like that this just didn't feel like enough. Like I think if Willow taught us anything, it's that don't count on a second season. Like you may be
Yeah.
erased from existence without
Mhm.
any way to follow up. Like you can't watch Willow anymore. Like we'll never know what happened to Matt Mardigan because they gambled on a second season and they shouldn't have done it.
Mhm.
See, now it's going to be hard not to get into like a Willow tangent. Like I've never seen anything like that before. Like that's the dangers of digital media. Like you don't get to own like if I bought the Willow tape, I just own the tape. Like I can watch it as long as I have a VCR. I own Willow, and it's you don't own the Willow series. Like it does not exist anymore unless you
Yeah.
legally pirated it. It's gone. I wish that they kept it. Like I like there's a lot you can learn from what Willow did wrong. Like there's some valuable lessons in there.
Put Willow in the history books, it's that'll be a lesson, I'm sure, in film school one day. It's just like what happened
Yes.
with Willow, what that means, the dangers of streaming.
hmm And just how to like tell good stories in a season.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like you can't just leave things open. Like you never know. Like some shows I've really enjoyed just never got to like the Terminator Sarah Connor Chronicles. Like I really liked that show and it just ended. Like they're
Yeah.
like, sorry, we left a bunch of stuff open ended. Like there's gonna be no resolution ever. So sucks for you.
Yeah.
Anyways, going back to Acolyte, good cast all around. Even though a lot of the characters die.
Hmm.
I was fine with one of them dying. I was fine. I was fine seeing Yord get killed. I was like, I don't need any more Yord. He's too. Like, his upper lip is way too stiff for me. Like he's no fun at all. It's just to get on him real quick. Like it seemed like it wasn't sure how they wanted you to feel about him because sometimes the facade would crack a little bit. You're like, okay, so am I supposed to like him? Like, because it's not working either. Like I don't hate him, but I don't think he's cool. Like I just kind of would rather him not be there. Like, oh, okay, there we go. We're
Yeah.
good. He's gone. Like, and he also has the unfortunate, like, in the ethnic community, there's a running joke about how once Killmonger was introduced to the world in Black Panther, the Killmonger haircut has become the go-to design choice for black characters in all media. Like, you look at any video game, there's a new black character with a cool style, and we're like, let me guess, he's got the Killmonger, right? And so it's like a running gag. Like, white creators need to be stopped. Like, this is too much Killmonger. So he shows up, and he's got this sort of, like, great value Killmonger style, where, like, the braids are, like, a little too far apart, and it's just, like, they were going for a Killmonger, but couldn't quite make it look as relaxed and cool as Michael B. Jordan's version of it. So I hated him even more. I'm like, this
Yeah.
fake ass Killmonger, get him out of here. Let him get him off the screen. And he just had so many dumb lines and moments.
Yeah.
He's the most police out of all of them. Like he's a fucking cop through and through. But it seemed like in general, like, the vibe I got from him was like superiority. Like I made it and you didn't, and you're a quitter, so I'm gonna kind of resent you for that. And so that would come out in weird little like power trips where like the gun thing, for instance, like they were already like she had already been asked to join them on this trip. Like she didn't want to go. They all got together. They all geared up together, presumably, and then they went together. They're at the planet. They're at the destination. Then suddenly they're alone, and he's just like, you can't have that weapon. I'm like, bro, we are so far past that at that point. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't sneak this. Like, it's on my hip, like clearly visible to those in charge. Like, which you are not. Like, let's get this clear. You're
Yeah.
not the boss of me. He's middle management all the way. Like, he's not the boss of anybody, but he's trying to be. Like, he sucks. Like,
Yeah.
but all right, you know who my MVP is?
I have an idea, but I couldn't tell you the name.
It's Basil.
Yep. That's
I
it.
want I want that guy to get his own series. I want to know more about his life. What do you think of Basil?
Basil's cute. And he's really cool.
I mean, lots of people hated him.
Why?
Like it's like
Oh,
they're like, what's his purpose? Why is he here?
yeah.
Like why? And I'll say this: like, why did he sabotage Saul? Like, whose side is he on?
I don't know. That's why he's so interesting.
Like, yeah, it seemed like, oh, he's got like ultra sniffing powers. Like he's gonna be able to like tell that this is not OSHA, and he can, but it doesn't go anywhere. Like Saul still arrives at that conclusion on his own, and then he sabotages the ship, and then he's just gone. Like he was
Yeah.
just kind of like this, like free to do whatever he wanted. Like, all right, so like, listen, people that hated him, like, listen, he did annoy me too for those exact reasons. But let me counter it with this. He had a little pilot's cap on and a little jacket, and that's just the best. Like he's just a little dressed up weasel guy. Like I don't even think he knows that he has clothes on. Like he doesn't seem to be like sentient in that way. Like
Yeah.
he's just an animal, but he's got like a little outfit on. So he's like a dog with a sweater kind of thing. Like
Hmm.
I want to see him when he gets home from work from sniffing things for the Jedi, and he just takes his little hat off, and his little wife is there waiting for him in there. Like they probably live in a tree stump or something, I imagine.
Yeah.
I just like his overall execution. Like I thought he was like his movement and his facial animations and just his like it all looks really good. So I was excited to see a new creature that had a purpose that seemed unique.
Yeah.
I mean, in general, I thought there was good creature effects across the board from Headland.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
and then we even got to see a Wookiee fight with a lightsaber, and it wasn't embarrassing. Um, actually, I take that back. I was a little embarrassed, but it wasn't too bad. It's just when he showed up, and she's like, "You shouldn't have brought him," and he's like, "But my mind is good." She's like, "No, him," and it cuts into this like hands on the hips, like hero shot, like da da da. But the fight was good.
Yeah.
But from what I understand too, the guy who played the Wookiee Kelnaka was the guy who plays Chewie now, right? Is that the same actor?
I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know, but that makes sense.
Yeah, so she made the right call because that guy knows, like he knows Wookiee, but
Yeah.
he also didn't seem like Chewbacca, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
Like he seemed like a different Wookiee, but he was like a well-played, well-executed Wookiee.
Hmm.
What do you think of Carrie-Anne Moss?
I thought, yeah, I guess I thought she was pretty cool.
I mean, like she trusted people to be smarter than they were, and she just shouldn't have. Like that was her biggest
Yeah.
mistake. Like Saul even grabbed her at one point. Like she's like, "Motherfucker, did you just put hands on me?" Like she gave him a good look, you know. She's like, "Calm down, dude. Like look at you." Like she should have put his ass in a holding cell at that point. Like he was clearly like not in his right mind about the situation. He escalated it.
Hmm.
And speaking of Saul, that was a weird scene. Like when he went through, like he's like, you know, their mom was like you're wondering if you're gonna let us take them, aren't you? And then there's like a weird escalation, like standoff kind of energy happening, and then she starts to transform into this like demon cloud, and then Saul's like this looks threatening to me. I'm gonna stab you, and she's like, oh, you idiot! I was gonna let you take her, and I was like, were
What?
you? Like you were just a demon cloud, like with black eyes. But even just in their next interaction, like when he comes up the elevator and she's like being coy about it in a way that was like wholly avoidable. Like she's like, I bet you're wondering if you're gonna be let you take like it's like just say they can go. Like avoid this whole misunderstanding. You're
Yeah.
establishing this air of mistrust and dominance in the power structure here, and now you're gonna turn into a demon cloud. Like, yeah, get stabbed. Like, of course these guys are completely defensive right now. And
Yeah.
they all demon clouded in a way and collectively took over the mind of Kelnaka, where I guess Carrie-Anne Moss single-handedly just murdered them all telepathically. Like, I had to rewind this a couple of times, but, like, it seemed to be like they were, like, a crew. Like, it took all of them. Like, the mother could just take Torben on her own because he's young and weak. But Kelnaka is a master and a Wookiee. So
Yeah.
you're going to need a little bit more like juice behind your efforts. It's a group effort. So they got together, they piloted Kelnaka, and then Carrie-Anne Moss just exercised them in a way that resulted in their collective death. That seemed to be, and that was a weird, like, I felt it was just kind of lazy. Like,
Yeah.
how do we get to the point where they're all dead?
That's what I mean. The whole flashback sequence just kind of feels lazy. That's for like a show that has some pretty interesting concepts, and then you have those two episodes, and it feels like it's just taken aback so much.
Yeah. And it's just like, how do we get them out of here? Oh, snap at the fingers. That's it.
Yeah.
She just sonic blasts them and they're gone. And so by the end of it, I was like, okay, they're all supposed to be this cool witch coven, but they're all bad. Like, I never got the sense that any of them had any sort of reasonability or goodness, goodwill in them.
Yeah.
Like, they were willing to, like, take over another person's mind to the point where it would have killed them if it was disconnected. So, like, you're bad. You're a bad person. And you could argue all day that the Jedi were in the wrong too, but it's like, well, you know, like that's what I didn't like about it. It's like I didn't like anybody by the end of this except Manny Jacinto's Khmer.
Yeah.
And it just seems like mistakes in communication lead to disaster. Like maybe it was enough to set the stage for Osha becoming the Acolyte. So here's a question for you. Do you want to see any sort of follow-up with these characters?
I wouldn't mind it. Like, I would definitely, I wouldn't be like, on my toes excited for it, but there are interesting ideas here, and I think a lot of that follows up with the present day stuff and like some of the stuff that's kind of, led or supposed to be led to a second season.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't mind seeing a lot of this stuff come back, but, again, it'll just never happen.
Yeah, and had there been a second season, maybe what they could have done is maybe Khmer shows her a way that's like, you don't have to be a bad person. Like he's cool as shit. And I don't believe that his coolness was a ruse or some sort of manipulation. He's just like, no, I'm just a chill bro who didn't like these weird incels telling me what I could and couldn't do with my feelings.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'll fight them if I have to, but I don't generally want to live like that. Like, I just want to have my own destiny in my own hands. So it's like, well, what is the dark side? It's like she cared so much that it was deemed unacceptable by this order. Then is that a bad thing? Like, is it bad to experience your feelings? Like, what is the benefit of cutting them off? And it's like, well, you kind of saw that. Like, you got a spectrum of the consequences, like Saul, who is like, I care so much that it's actually going to cause a lot of problems. And you got someone who's like, I'm so bent on revenge and my hatred that's going to cause a lot of problems. So I think the only, like, this is what this is really telling me is that we need to revoke the Second Amendment on force powers. We need to, like, ban, like, no one should be using this shit. Like, no one has any right to wield this power. Like, they're all corrupt. Are they all misinterpreting or misusing it or something? Like, things just spiral too far out of their hands. Like, we just need a ban. Like, I'm with the senator in the end. Like, the guy that so that's another thing what I didn't like about the ending of this. Like, you got that senator who's very anti-Jedi, which is presented in a way that makes sense. Like, it makes sense that someone would be anti-Jedi when they're trying to legislate around the existence of these people. And he's like, I propose a full investigation but it's a prequel. And so already we know that doesn't happen. So it's like, that was kind of weightless because we know that they're going to exist in the prequel time. So cool, but also like, what are you going to do with that? Like, except make another commentary on how the Jedi became the way they were. So I want a future where we get to sort of see the consequences of maybe some oversight, like who watches the Watchmen kind of thing, Like, and like, what about the people who don't have access to the Force? Do they have a say in this?
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see for sure.
Like, no, the Force is beyond your control. Will manipulate the rules, and you're here to go with the flow for better or for worse.
Yeah.
Like, who knows? Maybe some dude will decide to walk into a bar and just chop your hand off with a lightsaber when you're having a bad day, Yeah. And he's the good guy. Star Wars is a mess. It's always been a mess. I appreciate it, but to me, the perfect arc is just the first 3 films. Like,
I agree. Yeah.
The further out I get from it, I'm like, you could have just ended it after that. Like, there was a full story there, and they got to go for the money. For those who don't know what I just referenced, it's a line from Princess Leia in The New Hope, where she's like, I knew you were in it for more than the money. It's like they use the word money in this universe. Like, that's our word. It's not like space bucks.
Space bucks.
We use money. That's another thing. Like they say go to hell in the show at one point or something like that. And it's like, I know Han Solo says, what the hell are you doing in A New Hope? So like hell is technically canon in Star Wars.
Yeah. Well, he says it in Empire too. We'll see you in hell.
That's true. So, but it just takes me, that sort of, this is just random, but that sort of thing takes me out of Star Wars, but it's like, okay, are we talking Christian hell or Dante's Inferno hell?
Star Wars hell.
Space Star Wars hell. That's it. I think that's a great way to end it. I'm feeling cleansed now.
Yeah.
Star Wars hell. Chris, where can the people find you online?
You can find me over on Instagram and Letterboxd.
Yeah, same here. And I am also on Blue Sky. I do some stuff there sometimes. And I'm also a video editor on the amazing Spider Talk podcast for the YouTube channel. So check that out as well. And we'll see you all next time soon, where we might do something Superman related. So take care, everyone.